Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Government Center in Forsyth County. Today we're going to discuss a declaration of a state of emergency in Forsyth County and Winston-Salem. It's good to have all of you with us. As you can see behind me, we have a number of people who will be speaking, and they will be taking questions and providing answers for all of the problems, needs, and interests that you're here to hear about, talk about, and discuss. To my immediate right is the Mayor of Winston-Salem, Alan Joines, and I would like to have him come and give you some idea from the written page of what we're here for, and then we'll take some comments from those with us, and then we'll be glad to hear from all of you. Mayor Joines.
Thank you, Commissioner Plyler, and good morning, everyone. Yesterday, Commissioner Plyler and I, along with city staff and county staff, made a decision to declare a state of emergency here in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County for a number of reasons. First of all, it brings attention to our public about the seriousness of this situation. It encourages our citizens, both city and county, to develop emergency plans. It really enhances this whole state of the community in preparing for this event. Authorizes the opening of shelters here in our community as need be, and it makes Forsyth County and Winston-Salem eligible for FEMA reimbursement for work that we might have to do if we sustain significant damage and apply for those grants. The emergency operations plan does give the chairman and I authority to do that. I think you all perhaps have received copies of the declaration of the state of emergency, but I'm going to read portions of that just for the public who may be watching. And by the way, we are pushing this out live on Facebook so that folks will be able to see that. Whereas Hurricane Florence is expected to make landfall in eastern North Carolina and inflict damage across the state beginning on or about Thursday, September 13th, and may cause severe flooding and wind damage in the city of Winston-Salem and county of Forsyth. And whereas as a result of the above described disasters, I have determined that there is an imminent threat of or existing conditions that have caused or will cause widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life or property, and public safety authorities will be unable to maintain public order or afford adequate protection for the lives of the property. And whereas declaring a state of emergency and imposing the restrictions, prohibitions therein is necessary to maintain order and protect the public health and safety, welfare, and to secure our property. Now, therefore, pursuant to the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Winston-Salem under Article 1A of Chapter 166A of the North Carolina General Statutes and the Winston-Salem Code of Ordinance, I declare Section 1, a state of emergency is hereby declared within the jurisdiction of the city of Winston-Salem. The emergency area covered by this emergency shall be within the corporate limits of the city of Winston-Salem. And I hereby order all city law enforcement officers and employees and all other emergency management personnel subject to our control to cooperate in the enforcement and implementation of the provisions of this declaration, all applicable local ordinances, state and federal laws, and the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Emergency Operations Plan. And I signed that yesterday, and of course, Commissioner Plyler signed a similar order pertaining to the county of Forsyth. We do have a number of individuals here, and I'm going to introduce all of them at one time and let them come up following each other to try to make it move smoothly. First of all, August Vernon, who is the director of the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Office of Emergency Management, and he has been, of course, the point of the spear on this whole operations here. The Honorable Bill Schatzman, who is the Forsyth County Sheriff. Dan Osmick, who is the Forsyth County Emergency Services Director, and Wilson Weaver, who is the Winston-Salem Assistant Police Chief, Trey Mayo, who is our Winston-Salem Fire Chief, and then Dan Bessie, who is the Chairman of our Public Works Committee of the Winston-Salem City Council. So we begin with August Vernon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. There is a lot of activity that is related to the storm that's occurring right now. So what I tried to do is break it down into 3 areas for discussion this morning. The first component that the Office of Emergency Management, one of our areas of responsibility, is coordinating the response. And one of the ways we've been doing that for the past week now is we've had meetings with over 150 individuals from almost 50 different local, city, state, county municipal representatives to talk about planning for the response and the recovery from the storm when it impacts the Winston-Salem and Forsyth County area. Also, we are in daily communications with the National Weather Service, where we're getting the latest forecast and hurricane tracks. And we're also in daily communications with the State Division of Emergency Management, where we can send resource requests to them and they send resource requests to us. So the coordination is the first main component to the response. The second part we are working on is Winston-Salem and Forsyth County is fortunate enough to have different resources that we can send to help some of the other impacted communities in North Carolina who will be severely impacted by the storm. Some of those resources include water rescue teams, human services teams, healthcare teams, sheltering operations teams, incident management teams, fire engines, and additional resources. So those resources, we are certainly right now keeping those resources here until we see what the impact is in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. Immediately, once we know that we are safe and secure, we will start deploying those resources and helping those resources deploy to the impacted communities of North Carolina, because we know they will be seriously impacted and will need a lot of assistance. A third component to the response that's developed in about the past 24 hours is we have opened a coastal evacuation shelter at the LJVM Coliseum. Typically, we are not involved in that, but because of all the communities that would typically be used in the coastal evacuations are also going to be impacted by the storm, those evacuees are being sent as far west to Winston-Salem and other areas beyond. So that shelter opened last night. It takes multiple departments and agencies to manage that. The latest numbers I received this morning is we know we have 50 evacuees in there and one pet. There's kind of two parts to the sheltering operation. There's the human sheltering operation, and then there's the animal operation, the animal sheltering operation. Those numbers could have changed by the time we're doing this press briefing, and we'll obviously continue to monitor that and support that operation. And it's one of the ways that we can support those communities that are being seriously impacted by the storm. Thank you, sir.
There are two people that are here this morning that you're going to probably see a lot of their vehicles and their departments. One is the Sheriff of Forsyth County, Bill Schatzman, and the other is Dan Osment, who runs the emergency medical service, the ambulances that meet the needs and the problems of our population. We'll begin with Sheriff Schatzman, and Dan, if you'll come up right after that, we'll hear from you. Thank you.
Good morning, Bill Schatzman here with the Sheriff's Office. Just want to take this opportunity to mention two things to you. One, we are prepared here in Forsyth County to include Kernersville and Winston-Salem, and they will speak on their issues. But certainly we're prepared here in Forsyth County for this potential natural disaster as a result of the hurricane that's coming ashore on our coast. We have plenty of resources here, both physical and human resources here to accommodate anything that should occur. We're certainly prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. All of the Sheriff's Office personnel are on standby to respond if necessary. And I'm certain that the other emergency first responding agencies are in the same position. The second thing I want to mention to you is that I was very fortunate to be named and appointed to the State Emergency Response Commission by Governor Perdue and reappointed by Governor McCrory and Governor Cooper. As such, we meet 4 times a year to discuss the appropriate deployment of physical and human assets that are located in the 100 counties of North Carolina. And we in all to prepare for natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, wind damage in the mountains, but also man-made disasters. And we know all too much about those. So we are prepared. The state has been ahead of preparing for this type of event for months and years. We've been working on this now for several weeks in anticipation of the hurricane season to deploy assets as necessary to the eastern counties of North Carolina. So you can be assured that we are prepared for the worst, of course, and hoping for the best. That is, we're up in conjunction, of course, with all the power companies. Power outages is the worst thing that can happen in terms of people not impacted by floods, but by wind and tree damage, tree downs, it's power outages. So we're coordinating all of that here in Forsyth and throughout the eastern half of the state to ensure that that does not impact our lives in a really, really bad way. Next is Director Osmick.
Good morning. I'm Dan Osmick, Chief of Forsyth County Emergency Services. I'm briefly going to discuss the storm preparations for our 3 emergency services divisions: Forsyth County Fire Department, the 911 Center, and EMS. We are planning up for staffing normal operations, which include our local support for the volunteer fire departments and operations of the Smith Reynolds Airport. We're currently working with other agencies in event shelters that are needed. Our local volunteer fire departments have also taken time to prepare planning for increased call volumes and storm conditions. In the 911 Center, our additional staffing has been added to handle probable increase of call volume beginning tonight and throughout the event. All off-duty personnel in all emergency service divisions have been placed in a waiting to be engaged status in case we need to increase staffing in our backing up our 911 Center. And also, the 911 Center has an inventory of local capable portable radios that have been charged and are ready to use. Our computer aided dispatch machines have also been installed in the EOC. In the EMS division, we will continue to our normal daily operations with call volumes with our ambulances that are stationed throughout the city and the county. Our spare ambulances will be staffed as needed, dictated by call volume, and placed in city-county borderlines to assist in possible delayed response times due to the storm. We will use our off-duty supervisors and our mobile integrated healthcare paramedics to assist in shelters if needed, and also place them in QRVs to also enhance response times if needed. I'd like to end with just talking about a few safety points to you as the public. I would like to encourage our residents to continue to prepare for the storm, which I'm sure many of you have. As everyone knows, these storms can at times be very unpredictable, and the tracking of the storm can change significantly over a period of time. I would encourage you, do not use generators or grills inside a building of your home if you lose power. Ensure your smoke alarms are operational and you have battery backup. Have plenty of supplies on hand and anticipate power outages, staying away from down power lines. And I would also encourage you to stay away from flooded areas and do not drive your vehicles through standing water, and adhere to all barricades that are blocking the road and find another route if needed. And then more importantly, watch out for the first responders working on blocked roads, the Duke Power, and all the agencies that will be servicing, trying to get the community back to normal after this event ends. It's not uncommon at times that our emergency responders are injured during these events, and so please stay home as much as you can and give us the opportunity to bring the community back to normal. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I can say without equivocation or reservation that the entire board of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners is really proud of our county and our city people who are ready, willing, and able to do the job. One of the things we think about, and you see very often, more often than sometimes you think it ought to be, only because we have active people who do active things to help our citizens, keep us healthy, keep us safe. And from the fire department, I'd like to ask you all to come up here and give us some idea of what you're expecting and what you're ready to do.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Trey Mayo. I'm the fire chief for the city of Winston-Salem, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to let you know about preparatory efforts the fire department has been undertaking. We began last Wednesday with readiness for our water rescue teams, doing additional equipment checks, relocating, repositioning resources. Yesterday and this morning, operations branch crews have been out in areas known to be flood prone, distributing door hangers to warn residents and business owners to prepare for potential flooding in areas where we know we have had problems in the past, encouraging them to seek higher ground, move vehicles out of low-lying areas, staying with friends and family as appropriate, avoiding hazards such as standing water, flooded roads, downed trees and power lines, and damaged structures. The Winston-Salem Fire Department staffs 2 Type 3 swiftwater rescue teams every day of the year for response to incidents involving pools and ponds and lakes and streams. These are 4-person teams. One is stationed on Chatelaine Drive, one is stationed on Somerset Drive. And then in addition to those 2 teams, last night at 8 p.m., we brought a 14-person Type 1 water rescue team online. They're stationed at the station on Arbor Road. Between those 3 teams, they have 6 boats, a rescue raft, and a large cache of specialty equipment at their disposal. In addition to that, all heavy apparatus in the fleet are equipped with personal flotation devices and rope throw bags in order to be able to help stranded victims out of high water. At 7:30 this morning, we brought a mini pumper online, and at noon today, we'll bring 3 additional full-size pumpers online, along with a breathing air resource unit and 2 4-wheel drive light vehicles. All the heavy apparatus will come up to a minimum 4-person staffing, and just to sort of give you a picture of what that looks like, so on a typical day, there'll be about 90 firefighters on duty in the city, but from noon today until the time that we realize we're in the clear, there'll be about 135 fire personnel on duty. And then if things go in our favor, that Type 1 14-person rescue team, that'll be made available through the State Division of Emergency Management, and so it'll be available as a statewide resource to be deployed where perhaps Mother Nature was less forgiving. Thank you.
Chief Trey, I can tell you, I live at the bottom of the hill in Kernersville, which means water always comes to the bottom of the hill, and it's good to know that there are boats around that I might be able to catch a ride on if it's necessary, and I hope it isn't. As Sheriff Schatzman said a moment ago, you just don't know what's going to happen. That's part of what we're dealing with here. We need to talk about law enforcement. And you can come right up here and tell these folks about your boats and what you might be able to do and what you're expecting.
We don't have a Marine unit. We will depend on the fire department to handle those. I am Wilson S. Weaver II, Assistant Police Chief for the Winston-Salem Police Department, Assistant Police Chief over the Patrol and Special Operations Divisions, speaking on behalf of Katrina A. Thompson, Chief of Police. At this current time, the Winston-Salem Police Department is conducting normal operations. We have the staff and the emergency equipment leveled at appropriate levels so that we have the ability to respond to any particular emergency that may happen, regardless of whether it's human-sourced or man-made. Currently, we're operating on our normal 10.5-hour schedule, but we have the flexibility to extend those shift times as needed and also bring in additional personnel as needed. With the opening of the Lawrence Joel Veterans Memorial Emergency Shelter, we have partnered with Wake Forest, the Office of Emergency Management, and the Red Cross to provide 24-hour security at that facility. That's both for the animals and for the humans that will be there. Our security at the Lawrence Joel Veterans Memorial Coliseum does not impact our ability to handle any type of 911 emergency calls, any weather-related calls, or any other calls for police service. Some of the items of note for today is that at 2 p.m., the Coliseum parking lot will close due to the Wake Forest event that'll be held later on this afternoon. Anyone who will need access to the shelter and the shelter only will need to park at the Red Cross building on Coliseum Drive just off of University Parkway. There will be shuttles available from the Red Cross parking lot to the emergency shelter. That's all that the police department has. We're available as needed, dial 911 to get our services, and we'll be right there as soon as we can get there. Thank you, Winston-Salem. Thank you, Forsyth County.
One of the things that elected officials have to do is make sure that the health and safety of the citizens is protected. And one of the fellows who makes and ladies too, makes those policies is Dan Bessie. Dan is not only an attorney, but he is a fellow that I've known for a long time, and he is deeply interested and really sharp when it comes to situations like this. Dan, could you kind of share us what's going on with municipal policy?
Thank you, sir. Again, I'm Dan Bessie. I'm on the Winston-Salem City Council. I'm here this morning in my role as the chair of the Public Works Committee of the Winston-Salem City Council. Of course, in an emergency, the first services that you think of in terms of public assistance are police and fire. They do yeoman's work, and we thank them for that. But in and around a natural emergency like a hurricane, you often think of the regular city services that you depend on every day. What's running? When's it going to run? So the Public Works Committee oversees departments like streets, transportation, sanitation, water and sewer. And in anticipation that you may be asking questions about some of those, have some information to share. It's been updated as of about 10 minutes ago, so you have to keep on top of the things when you've got a changing storm situation. As of today in Winston-Salem, sanitation services are running. In case you had any question, both the garbage pickup and the recycling pickups are being made today. As of 10 minutes or so ago, our folks in sanitation had no reason to believe, based on the current weather forecast, that they would have to cancel tomorrow's sanitation collections. But keep an eye on that. If the forecast worsens, they'll be checking that. As of today, both the city bus and the regional bus system are operating. That's WISTA in Winston-Salem, and PART, Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation, on a regional basis. The only exception to that is Route 5 for PART. That is the Amtrak connector between Winston-Salem and High Point. It is not operating because the trains that it would normally serve have been shut down temporarily because of flooding risks along parts of the tracks. So everything in terms of public transit in Winston-Salem and the regional system are going today. We anticipate at this point they will be going through the weekend, but again, watch for those updates. If the weather changes, that information will be pushed out through the media. In terms of streets, it can't be said too many times, do not attempt to drive through standing water. If you are the first on the scene of a flooded area where the street crosses a low-lying area, just, as they say, don't drown, turn around. Just leave it alone. If it doesn't have a police car or a barrier up yet, call in 911 and we will get one out there. If it has a barrier, don't try to drive around it. I mean, have some sense, guys. The streets department indicates that they have all their equipment gassed up, powered up, and pre-positioned in strategic locations around the city, so that they will be ready to put out those barriers where they're needed and when they're needed. Again, thank you very much, and I'll be here. I believe that, yes.
Don't go away.
I will not go away.
One of the things that the media has stressed is you may need to have a lot of water for yourself. And Dan Bessie is on the City County Utilities Commission schedule. The county appoints members of that committee. Dan and his people appoint members of the City County Utilities Commission. But the fact is, we have an awfully good water system and sewer system. So Dan, come up here for a second. When I was out doing my morning walk this morning, I heard a fellow say, why do we have to buy water from the grocery store? Not knocking grocery stores, but I went to Lowe's Foods in Walkertown yesterday. They're out of water. What happened to the tap in the kitchen?
Well, the taps are running, and they anticipate that they will stay running throughout the system on a regular basis. Just as a general precautionary matter, it's always good to have some water in your house in case there is some work down the road, in case in dealing with another situation, they accidentally hit a water main and it goes off, in case in an area that we haven't yet gotten updated with new utility lines, and we're working on that throughout the city and county on an ongoing basis. But if there's an area where there's an older line hasn't been updated yet, it could spring a leak and that could affect your water pressure. There are any number of things that would do that, and so it's always good to have, just as a general precaution, in your house or garage, some water supplies in case you have a temporary interruption. But we have high-quality water in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. We don't anticipate that changing, and we have no reason to believe at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Duquesne, but we have no reason to believe at this point that we would see any interruption of our water and sewer service on a system-wide basis. Thank you.
I would ask everybody at the front here to step up to the microphone if any question comes up. But we've been talking now for 29 minutes. Y'all been patient. It's time for questions.
Good morning, Janae Lewis with WXII 12. We had received some questions regarding construction equipment and where that would be put and how it would be handled. Is there anyone that can give an update on the status
Who would like
of
to answer that? Why not?
The question was, what about all the construction equipment that's around the city and county, and what will be happening to that? As we discussed yesterday, and Damon, our Assistant City Manager for Public Works, is here, maybe just ask him to comment on that, but my understanding is we're going to try to pull that equipment in because we may need it actually as well.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Damon Duquesne, Assistant City Manager, City of Winston-Salem. So the staging of equipment, just for clarification on your question, so backhoes and things like that, they'll be staged in their normal areas at city yards. Primarily the equipment that's being staged are Type 3 barricades and barrels in areas of known flooding. We have maps, the fire department has it, the city and county both share that information, and we have those items staged so that we can close those roadways and keep the public safe in the event that has to be done.
Okay. Next question. So everybody ask a question first.
Mr. Commissioner Warren.
One more question about the shelter. I know the shelter at the Coliseum can hold up to 1,000 people. I'm told that buses are headed in. Will there be a situation where schools that are closed will need to be used as shelter, or how would that process work?
Okay, good question. The question is about the status of the shelters. So there's a couple options with shelters. This is primarily a shelter for coastal evacuees. I have a feeling we may not know how many we're getting till they show up, because obviously right now on the coast, they have issued a lot of mandatory evacuations, and it seems that people are heeding that warning. So there's a couple options. We do have lists of approved and certified inspected locations that we could use as shelters. Those could be schools, or they could be other locations. Right now, we really have not designated any other places as shelters because we don't know the impact of the storm here locally in Forsyth County. Also, if we need to open shelters in Forsyth County, based on the numbers in the Coliseum, that will also be open to our citizens if we need to. So as far as sheltering, we have a lot of different options.
Questions? Yes.
Just one other note with regard to that first question regarding the equipment around the city. One point that I meant to make and didn't recall to that's relevant to that. One of the most common problems in extremely heavy rainfall, such as we anticipate may hit our area, is that you will have trees that fall over because their root systems come up in the saturated ground. When you see one of those situations, if you think you may be the first person, alert 911 and they will get that in progress. But understand that if your power goes off and you alert Duke Power to that, which is who you should call. They have to send a crew out and assess whether there are live lines down and de-energize those lines. Then the city can come, or the county can come, and move the trees off the roads, cut them up. We do have equipment around for that, but it's a process that takes at least those 2 steps, and then Duke Energy can repair the lines and get the power back up. So that's why that process may take longer than you think it should. You've got to de-energize the lines, and Duke does that. Then if it's on city streets, the city crews may need to cut up the trees and take them off, and then Duke comes back, puts up their equipment, and re-energizes the line so your power comes back on.
Have a question back here.
Forgive me, I might have missed this, but are there any plans to send crews from here to the coast if help is needed over there?
Forsyth County Emergency Services has, the question was sending crews from this location locally, if not needed, to other areas of the state or south. Forsyth County EMS has a 28-passenger ambulance bus, and the purpose of that bus is to help in evacuations for like nursing homes or apartment complexes or some area that needs to be evacuated and possibly transported to a shelter. And that's been put on standby, and the State Office of EMS is aware of that. There's several of these buses that have been positioned throughout the state, and we're leaving ours here in case we need it locally, and then post-event, more than likely, we will be moving that ambulance to an area that is needing that type of transportation.
And if I could just follow up on that question about resources, as I stated earlier, there is a wide variety of resources available both locally and that are able to deploy. And some of those meetings I've been talking about with over 50, 60 agencies, we do have teams that can either respond locally. Again, that includes the water rescue teams, emergency services, fire departments. There's chainsaw crews that are available to deploy, health and human services teams, sheltering operations, animal rescue, incident management teams, which are basically teams that will go help these impacted jurisdictions with managing their emergency operations centers. So it is a wide variety of resources that are available to deploy.
Another question?
Yeah, sorry, and you might have said this as well, but you talked about animal teams. Is the shelter doing anything for people who might be heading this way as well, as far as pets go?
Yes, the shelter, part of it, the human shelter, is an animal shelter. And the question was about what are we doing to try to help animals and pets and service animals. There is a sheltering operation for animals at the annex. This is a joint effort between Wake Forest University, the Coliseum, and the city of Winston-Salem and the annex. That puts the family members close to the pets and the animals. And there is a 24/7 operation sheltering for those animals by trained and experienced individuals, including the Piedmont Animal Response Team. Those same resources also have been put on standby to deploy to help the other areas. And pets are one of the #1 reasons that people will not evacuate. So that's one of the reasons we try to address that as much as we can.
Question?
Is there anything being done specifically in these flood-prone areas that you guys can let us know about?
So the question is what is being done in the flood-prone areas. There's a couple proactive actions taking place, and some of the others behind me may be able to answer. Example, the fire department is putting hanging tags and other ways to put out information to remind people that live in those impacted areas prepare for flooding. Also, the pre-staging of resources to try to block those roads. And I'll take that question to remind everyone, and after hurricanes, both on coastal and inland areas, most of the injuries and the fatalities from a hurricane aren't caused by the storm. They're caused afterward by drowning, stepping on power lines, and those type of other things. So just because a storm is over, that doesn't mean it's quite safe to just go out and start traveling around and seeing the damage. So I just wanted to mention that. And if anyone else would like to address the flooded areas.
Great.
Good morning, Trey Mayo again from City Fire. So we've been out yesterday afternoon and this morning hanging what I call door hangers. I mean, that's what they're made to hang on doorknobs, and it's English on one side, Spanish on the other, flood tips before, during, and after, encouraging folks to seek higher ground before they become stranded, and what to do during the flood. And then there's information on there about things to, after the flood recedes, things that need to be tended to. One of the situations we see is there are some apartment complexes that are in these low-lying areas where we have historically had problems. And by nature of that being tenant-occupied housing, the turnover there is higher, more transient than some other areas in the city. So there are oftentimes a lot of people who are in those apartment complexes that have not lived there long enough to experience the last flooding event. So we're trying to be as proactive as possible in saying, hey, you've moved into an area where we've had a problem in the past. You need to take action so that we don't have to send crews in here to float you out of here by boat.
And just also in terms of your question about what's being done proactively, our public works and the stormwater folks are making sure that the inlet drains are clear as possible and the culverts in the area are as free as possible so that they operate at peak efficiency. Mr. Chairman, I think we're going to stop here in terms of questions. The folks here behind me will be here available after we end the press conference to answer specific questions. But thank you all for coming. Mr. Chairman, do you want to say a final word?
Yes, we are glad that you're here, and this is a classic example of cooperative efforts between the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. We appreciate what y'all are doing. You got some experts behind us, and they're all out in the field. And I hope that if you have the time, get some of these guys and ladies and talk to them, see what they have to say, up close and personal. Thank you for coming. This has been 10 after 11, 40 minutes. That's not bad for a start, right, Sarah?
Good job.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.